As the slide says, let's talk about handles. So let's start with the Western handle. Western handles, also known as yo handles, have two sides to them known as scales, and the scales can be composed of various materials. They also have a continuation of the blade known as the tang, and that tang will typically extend all the way through the handle in a shape to match the handle itself. And many of them will have a bolster as well. One nice thing about this, it contributes a level of familiarity to those of us using Western knives and makes a great transition into Japanese knives for people that like that handle style. One of the other characteristics of Western or yo handles is they're a little bit heavier because you've got a lot of metal there in that tang, and they'll put the weight balance point of the knife right typically near the bolster. Longer blades might be a little in front of the bolster, shorter blades might be a little back of the bolster, but that's typically where the balance point is. So the other style of handle is, of course, the Japanese style handle, also known as the wa handle. And the Japanese handle has a tang as well from the blade that extends into the knife. It's usually smaller, and it does not extend all the way into the back of the handle like a Western handle would. So that combination usually makes a handle that's much lighter than on its Western counterparts. And one effect that'll have is it'll typically make the balance of the knife move forward of the handle or forward of the ferrule, sometimes by a fairly significant amount. If you have a pinch grip like I do, that sometimes puts that balance point right in your pinch grip, and it feels great, and it's a great balance for a knife. I personally like Japanese handles. I love wa handles. They're really cool. They're made out of some interesting materials, and they put the balance, unless it's a heavy material like an ebony, they'll typically put the balance point a bit more forward on the knife, and I personally like that. As far as shapes go on the handles, of course, Western handles are typically ambidextrous, no problem. Japanese handles can be different shapes. So you have some that are octagonal in shape. Some of them are oval in shape, like this Masakage. And then some of them are D-shaped. This is a little harder to see because it's a smaller petty. But the D-shaped, in this case, goes towards the right side of the handle, so it's more appropriate for a right-hander. It fits nicely in the palm of the hand. If you have a pinch grip like I do, I don't think that's such a big deal because I don't have much of my other side of the hand on that part of the handle, so it doesn't make as much difference to me. But if you see a knife with a D handle, just consider the fact that it is kind of oriented towards righties, especially if you have the racket-style grip. It may impact the feel of the knife, so just keep that in mind. So as long as we mention that, let's talk a little bit about grips. How you grip the knife will change the balance characteristics of the knife. So if you typically use a knife in more of a racket-style grip, maybe having the balance a little more rearward with a Western handle might suit you, versus if you use a pinch grip like I do, sometimes I feel like the handle is pulling the knife down just a little bit, but again, that's my particular style on a pinch grip. If you use a Japanese-style handle that's lighter and use a racket style, a forward blade balance may seem a little odd to you. It usually can be gotten used to pretty easily, but if you've got a pinch grip and that pinch happens to be right on that balance point, it feels great. So it just depends on the type of grip that you use. If you don't use a pinch grip, I would encourage you to use that. It will lend a lot of precision to your cutting and is a great grip to use. If you do pinch grip, remember though, you might have to smooth out the choil area of the knife, possibly the spine area of the knife if they're not already smooth from the factory, to make them comfortable for you. So that's it on handles. Let's move on. We got some more stuff to cover. Japanese knife blades are made from various steels, but they're also made using various construction techniques as well. There's three main types. One is monosteel, another type is clad, another type is a version of clad called Damascus. And this particular example right here is a monosteel knife. Monosteel simply means that the blade is made out of a single steel material. So this is a Richmond Artifacts. It's made out of a AEBL stainless steel, and the entire blade is constructed of that same steel, so a monosteel knife. Another example of a monosteel knife is this Konesuke HD2 Gyoto. This is made out of a semi-stainless steel, but again is a monosteel blade constructed out of the same steel throughout the blade. Another type of blade construction is a clad blade. Easiest way to show this is just put together our handy diagram here with our pieces of material. And a clad blade can be constructed different ways. Many of them are three-layer sandwiches, and one of those styles is known as a sanmai, which is literally means three thin sheets. And sanmai blades have two outer layers of usually a softer steel or an iron material, and that is known as the cladding on either side. And then the inner core of the blade is made from the harder steel that the cutting edge itself is made up of, and that's known as the hagane, and the cladding is known as the jigane. So you've got a 3-layer sandwich with cladding, softer steel or iron on the outside, and harder steel, the cutting steel, on the inside. If you take the cladding and you continue it over the top of the blade like this, so you don't show that sandwich at the top of the knife, that's known as a warikomi style of cladding. Another style is a single bevel knife where you've got 2 layers. One is, and this is called nimai, which means 2 thin sheets. And on the nimai or double layer single bevel knives, you've got the outer layer of the softer steel or iron and the cutting edge layer, which is the cutting edge metal itself. This is typically very flat, might have a slight concave to it to prevent food from sticking, and then the main part of the knife bevel itself, the single bevel that continues down all the way towards the cutting edge, is the cladding. And then it exposes the cutting layer as well. So this is a 2-layer sandwich for single bevel knives. When it comes to clad knives, another style is the Damascus. I don't have one here to show you. Damascus blade is basically, again, a core steel and then layers and layers and layers of cladding of either the same or different materials. You can have 17 layers or 40 layers or more than that, and they lend themselves to very pretty designs and interesting designs depending on what the blacksmith has done. So again, I don't have one here, but that's the Damascus style blade. So when it comes to clad blades, the blacksmiths will finish them in various ways. This particular knife is a Moritaka petty, and it has what's known as a kurouchi blacksmith's finish. It's got a black lacquer finish on the top, and then where it's ground down on the blade face or blade road towards the edge of the blade, the cutting surface, that's exposed raw material. And this is a really cool look. A lot of people like this rustic finish. The lacquer finish may wear off. Some knives are better at keeping this longer than others. So it may wear off in time. Some people take them off completely. This particular Tojiro in the kitchen or ITK knife is a carbon knife that I've just sanded down the entire lacquer finish off of and been playing with this for various reasons. So that's another style you can get into. This particular knife, this Moritaka, this is a really well-built knife. It's a nice knife, great handle with rosewood. It's just a cool knife to play with. Another example of that would be this Masakage Yuki knife. This is, again, a 3-layer sandwich, and it has stainless steel on the outside, and it's got a rustic, rough finish on it as well. It doesn't have the lacquer on it. And it continues down to the grind, and you can see the edge where the core steel is exposed right there. And so that's the inside, looking at my sheet here, inside hagane, and on the outside is the jigane. So softer steel, and then the hard core steel on this particular knife. So it's a real pretty finish on this knife. One thing I should mention to you that some people have mentioned on the Chefknivestogo forums is that some people feel that the clad knife, since it is made of differing materials, you're always going to get a damping effect when you when you meld dissimilar materials together. So this will have a bit of a more damped effect on the cutting board than a knife that's made out of a mono steel. You can actually, on the artifacts, kind of hear it ring when you're using it. So some chefs kind of like that board feel, that feedback of a mono steel knife, and some really don't care. It just depends on your personal preference. Something to think about a little bit. Doesn't bother me, but some people, it's a major consideration, and that's why there's so many styles available. So that's how knife blades are constructed. The sanmai, or the clad knives, tend to have a little bit thicker construction as well than some of the blades. You can make a monosteel blade thinner because you don't have the layers in there. So you will sometimes notice that clad blades can be a little bit thicker. Also, some blades, especially the handmade clad blades, can be pretty thick right behind where the handle starts off into the knife. So don't be put off if you have measurements that show the knife blade being a little thicker by the handle. It starts thinning out where the heel is and then can thin out from there. If they're cut well and they're ground well so the edge comes down nicely to a nice taper, they can still be very thin behind the edge, yet still have a little thickness up on top. So just different characteristics of the knife depending on how they're constructed. So we have more to cover. Let's keep going. Where the rubber really meets the road on Japanese knives is, of course, the steel. There are 3 main types of steel used in the core part of the knife, and that is full stainless, semi-stainless, and various carbon steels. One number you'll see on Chefknivestogo site and various other sites is a Rockwell hardness factor, or a number designated as RC or RCH sometimes. And I'm not a metallurgist, I'm not real technical on that, but that basically refers to the hardness of the steel. Japanese knives, again, have much harder steel typically than Western knives, and they'll start out in the 57, 58 range on the low end, up to sometimes 64, 65 on the Rockwell scale, which is very hard, or even higher depending on the particular steel. There's a balance of characteristics, of course, on steels, where they strive for a balance of toughness, strength, resistance to chipping, and various other factors, edge retention, and so on. So let's look at examples of some of these steels. In stainless, we're just going to talk about three main types here that are used in a lot of knives. So one of those is AEBL, which is a really nice stainless steel. Mark Richmond loves to use this in a lot of his knives. And general characteristics of this steel are easy sharpening, pretty high edge retention, great all-around characteristics. It sharpens as easily as a carbon in many cases, and it's just a really good all-around steel. A lot of the experts love this steel. It is a very good all-purpose knife steel. Another popular steel that's used in a lot of knives, for example, this Tojiro DP chef's knife. This is a Sanmai 3-layer constructed knife, but the center hard core of the knife is VG10, which is another very good stainless steel. It's got pretty good edge retention. It's not quite as easy to sharpen as ABL, sometimes prone to a little bit of a wire burr when you sharpen with, and as you get into sharpening, you'll get to know what that is if you don't know already. But it's also a very, very good stainless steel, very popular in many, many knives. Another type of steel that's pretty popular, I don't have one here, is known as Ginsan or G3. It's another very good stainless steel. There's not a lot between these stainless steels for the average person that sharpens. Unless you're an extremely good sharpener, you're probably not going to be push all of these steels to the edge of the envelope on their various characteristics. So use any of them, enjoy them. They're all going to be very good steels for knives. Another type of steel used is semi-stainless steel, and there's two main lines on the Chefknivestogo website that use that steel. One of those is a really awesome knife maker called Konesuke, and Konesuke uses an HD2 semi-stainless steel in a lot of their popular knives. It's a great steel. A lot of the experts love this. Got great characteristics to it. It is semi-stainless, so you do not need to give it quite the care that you would do a full carbon type of steel, but great steel to choose from. Another one is the Kikuichi Performance TKC line, which I don't have a sample of here, but that's made out of a semi-stainless steel as well. So kind of a balance between the stain resistance of a full stainless steel and some of the characteristics of a carbon steel. Last but not least, carbon steel. There's quite a wide variety of carbon steels available. We're going to talk about just a few of the more common ones used in the knives. A few experts have said, and I agree, that unless you're a really good sharpener, you're probably not going to push these steels to their limit as far as their capabilities. So some of these characteristics are general in nature, but for most of us, we're probably not going to be able to push them and understand all those characteristics in practice. So let's talk about one style, which is the Shirogami or white steel. Shirogami is available in three main flavors or types. Number 1, Shirogami or white number 1, white number 2, and occasionally white number 3. This particular Masakage Yuki is a white number 2. General characteristics, again, not everybody would see these, but white number 1 is recognized to take maybe the keenest edge of all the carbon steels. And white number 2 is recognized to be maybe a little tougher, a little better edge retention than white number 1, although very, very good edge taking capabilities on those steels. White number 3, I don't really have any experience with, but that's used occasionally in some knives. Another type of carbon steel is the Aogami, or also known as blue steel, and a popular type is blue number 2. This particular Moritaka Petty has a core of blue number 2 steel. Blue number 2 is generally recognized to have a good combination of toughness, edge retention, and edge taking as well, so a lot of people really love blue number 2 as an all-around carbon steel. Another one which I don't have here a sample of is the Aogami Super, known as AS steel. And that steel can be taken to a higher hardness level, to the 64, 65 range, even beyond. And that steel can take very steep edges, although sometimes with that high hardness and steep edges can be slightly more prone to chipping depending on how you use the knife. It's all about balance with these steels. So if they're done at the proper hardness levels for a given particular type of steel, they'll have good all-around characteristics. So to review, we have white are shiogami number 1, number 2, occasionally number 3. We have blue or aogami number 2, and we have aogami super or AS steel. And another type of steel that's used for some knives that Mark carries, like this particular knife, this is an Richmond Artifacts Gyuto, but this one's made of 52-100 carbon steel. And some of the experts on the forum, this is one of their favorite steels, is the 52-100. It's got a very good combination of all-around characteristics to it. So that's another one. There are many other ones. These are just some of the main ones we're going to talk about. As long as I have this 52-100 carbon steel knife in my hand, let's talk about carbon steel maintenance. Carbon steel requires different maintenance techniques than full stainless or semi-stainless steel. It doesn't necessarily require different maintenance. It requires that maintenance immediately when you're finished using the knife versus letting the knife sit. If you get some ingredients on this and get it wet and let it sit on the board for a while, depending on the knife, it may rust or discolor very, very quickly within a couple minutes, or it may take a little while, but it will discolor, maybe rust. Again, sometimes right away, sometimes maybe it takes a little longer. So you've got to get in the habit, if you're going to use a carbon steel knife, of keeping a towel nearby, wiping it down when you're done with a particular task, and getting that thing clean before you let it sit. Full stainless knives, much less care in terms of the immediacy of the care. Carbon steel knives, only you can decide whether you can give a knife that kind of immediate maintenance or not. In a professional environment, or you're on a busy line and you might not have time to take care of that, maybe a stainless or a semi-stainless is a better choice. At home, if you're willing to put the care into it and you've got the luxury of time like I do, I love carbon knives, and I think they're really cool. You can do some interesting things with patinas and other such with them, and it gives you a wide variety of choices available as well. So that's up to you. One of the things you need to think about is if you do have a clad knife, one thing nice about some clad knives, like this particular, again, Masakage Yuki, is the cladding is stainless steel. So the core is a white number 2 carbon, and the cladding is stainless. So the only part of the knife I have to worry about maintaining from an immediacy standpoint is that edge section where the carbon is exposed. So it gives you a nice balance of stainless, low maintenance, and carbon performance. So some knives are full carbon, all the way around, including the cladding. Some knives have a mixture of materials with a stainless cladding and a carbon core, kind of a nice combination. So if you're new to Japanese knives, by now you may be saying, Steve, whoa, put the brakes on. You've been throwing a lot of stuff at us. Can we recap that a little bit? So let's do that. Let's take a few examples and talk about the terms and just kind of cover the style of knife and all the different characteristics. So this particular knife is a Richmond Artifacts. So this has a Western or Yo handle, so we would refer to this as a Western or Yo handled Gyuto. This particular one is a 240 millimeter. That's the size. Of course, the handle is a Western handle. The profile is a rather flat profile. It's a Matsumoto KS or kind of French Sabatier profile. And the construction is a mono steel or single steel construction from AEBL full stainless steel. So full stainless, mono steel, Yo handled Gyuto 240 millimeter knife. Another sample is this Konesuke HD knife. So this is a Japanese or Wa handled Gyuto. Again, mono steel construction. So Wa Gyuto 240 millimeter mono steel. Another example, this Tojiro DP is a Western or Yo handled 210 millimeter Gyuto with a Sanmai 3-layer construction, hardcore, softer outside stainless cladding. So it's full stainless, but it is a clad 3-sandwich layer Sanmai knife. Another example would be this Masakage Yuki. So again, this is a Wa or Japanese handled 210 millimeter Gyuto. It is composed of a 3-layer sandwich in this particular case, so it's clad with stainless steel and a white number 2 core. Let's take a couple examples of petties. This is a Moritaka 130 millimeter petty. So it is a Wa handled, Japanese handled petty. It has the kuruichi finish. It's a clad construction, and the core of this is blue number 2. I would be remiss if I didn't include a little bit of information about knife care and maintenance. You know, knives that are this good, that cut this well, deserve the proper care from you. If you're like the typical American family, they usually abuse their knives. They throw them in the dishwasher, they chuck them in the sink and cut things they shouldn't. use glass cutting boards and a lot of other things that generally are abusive to the knife and the knife edge. If that's you, you're going to have to rethink how you care for knives a little bit to take full advantage of these. I don't care how nice of a knife it is. If it's dull, and you're not getting the performance that you've paid for or that you've got out of the box to keep that thing humming along smoothly. So what can you do to keep these edges nice on these knives? One of the things you can do to take care of your knives is learn how to sharpen. You don't have to do that if you find somebody that sharpens well and that can sharpen Japanese knives and not just somebody that just does knives. If they know how to sharpen Japanese knives well, that would be a good resource for you. You can learn how to sharpen yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be that difficult, and it can be fun. It can be rewarding. You can use a guided system like this Edge Pro Apex to help you learn, and it has a shorter learning curve and does an excellent job and produces amazing results if used correctly, to different Japanese water stones or other types of stones to do hand sharpening. It's also a rewarding experience, although it takes a little more investment in time and patience to learn how to do well. Those can be used to either maintain your cutting edge or resharpen the knife as it gets dull. You can also maintain knives in between regular sharpenings with other things like strops and also steels. Steeling is something you have to be a bit careful with because of the techniques that most people use, but some knives do benefit from steels, especially softer knives, European-style knives. This is a great steel that Mark carries called the Idaho fine ceramic steel. It does a great job on certain types of knives. Learn about sharpening, learn about knife care and maintenance, and it will serve you well. This is an important ingredient in your overall experience on the Japanese knife experience scale is the maintenance. If you fail to do that, you're going to be disappointed with the performance and not get all that investment out of the knife that you put into it. So maintain your knives, and as Mark says, stay sharp with those knives. And on that note, I want to encourage you to visit the chefknivestogo.com website. You'll find lots of information on the various product pages on the website. You'll find knife characteristics and measurements for comparison. And please take the time to visit the Chef Knives to Go forums. It is such a treasure trove of information with contributors ranging from newbies asking great questions to seasoned experts lending that wonderful expertise they have. It is a treasure trove for you to explore and learn about Japanese knives and the various sharpening and knife care and maintenance techniques available. And lastly, Mark Richmond, Sue Brown, and all the staff at Chef Knives to Go offer some of the most amazing customer service you will encounter from any company, anywhere. I guarantee it. Go visit the site, take advantage of that customer service, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.